Well, both my volunteer PR guy Richard and I have been burning the candle at both ends for quite a while now, so I figured it's time for another casual backyard episode of Don't Talk TV, where I share some relatively brief lawyer thoughts on a few things that are going on. So we'll talk about Hategate, we'll talk about the SS-Galicia Veteran being given a standing ovation in the House of Commons, and we'll talk about a new bylaw that's being discussed in Waterloo Region. Hello, my name is Nicholas Wansbutter. I'm a lawyer in Stratford, Ontario, Canada, and welcome to Don't Talk TV. So this episode will be pretty casual, minimal editing, so forgive me if it's not up to the usual standards that we try to keep at Don't Talk TV, but as I said, I've been extremely busy with work. My volunteer PR guy who helps me with editing and posting on all our socials, he's been burning the candle at both ends himself. So I'm just going to talk casually about these things. I won't be showing you laws or in-depth analysis of these things, but there's some important things happening in Canada that I did want to talk about. So first of all, Hategate. I mentioned a couple weeks ago that I wanted to talk about that in more detail. Essentially what it is, it's some very good investigative journalism done by another lawyer, Karima Assad, who describes herself as a Marxist brown Muslim, so certainly not someone that you would expect to be biased in favor of Jeremy Mackenzie and Diagolon, or anything even remotely savoring of the alt-right, but she is the one who put together this stuff. I'm putting in a link in the show description to the 85 or so page PDF that she put together on all this, but the TLDR version of this is essentially that through a bunch of access to information requests, she discovered that the anti-hate network has essentially decided that Diagolon was this dangerous terrorist hate group. They said Frog and Canada's intelligence and policing agencies started jumping around, expended massive resources to investigate what any of us who've actually listened to Mr. Mackenzie or know about Diagolon already knew. It's a joke. It's parody. But they treated this as a serious threat to Canadian security. So that's the example par excellence of the Canadian anti-hate network telling the government what to do and telling the government what is hate and what to do about that hate, as I mentioned in last week's episode. I recommend that you have a look at her PDF. It gives everything in much more detail, but it's concerning when a group like that, totally unelected, totally unaccountable, funded by the government, are directing these things, and it's important to know what their views are to see who may be targeted next and what you're allowed to say, what you're not allowed to say. Now, the second thing that I want to talk about, I mean, everyone's been talking about it. I'll just give you my take on this veteran of the SS-Galicia division who was given a standing ovation in Canada's Parliament. Now, the Conservative Party of Canada have been, banging this drum nonstop since it happened, and a lot of people get upset with me when I point out this inconvenient truth, but in my view, the Conservative Party's members of Parliament are almost as much to blame as the Liberal members. If you watch the video when the Speaker of the House, as he then was, Anthony Rota, introduced this individual, he introduces him as a war hero from World War II who fought against the Russians. Well, anyone who has even the most basic knowledge of World War history will know that, well, wait a minute, Canada was allied with the Russians during World War II, and if someone was fighting against the Russians, that means they were wearing field gray, i.e., they were fighting with the Germans. So this shouldn't have been a shock to anyone. If the Conservative Party members had concerns about honoring a Nazi, they shouldn't have been jumping up and clapping like trained seals along with everyone else. It would have taken a millisecond of thought to realize, hey, wait a minute, maybe this is something we shouldn't be jumping up and clapping about. Now, there's also been talk about Poland perhaps seeking extradition of this man. I think that's just a bit of political grandstanding. I doubt that anything would come of that for various reasons. I mean, for one, if there are any records left from the SS-Galicia division as to who was where, when, and did what, those are in the hands of Russia. And it's doubtful that there's any actual evidence of what this man did. Secondly, as far as I know, now I haven't done a deep dive into SS-Galicia, but as far as I know, they weren't involved in the final solution. Now, they did murder lots of Polish civilians, especially in the winter and spring of 1944. They did a lot of so-called ethnic cleansing in the western part of Ukraine, which at that time was Poland. Well, Poland occupied by the Nazis. I just don't see Canadian courts having the same concern over a bunch of slain Polish civilians as they would if SS-Galicia had been involved in the final solution and they were involved in the extermination of Jews. Extermination of Poles, I think they're not going to worry about it too much. The man's also 98 years old. Would he even survive for extradition proceedings to go ahead? But as I say, that Polish courts, from what I know of them, they'll need hard evidence, and I don't know that that'll be available, so Poland probably won't end up actually seeking extradition. Now, the third thing that I wanted to touch on briefly is this new bylaw that's being proposed in Waterloo Region. It's essentially a bylaw that makes protesting illegal. It's taking those no-go zones that are put around abortion factories to prevent pro-life protesters from being near them and expanding it to everything. So essentially what can happen, or what they're proposing, I don't think it's passed yet, is that bylaw officers for Region of Waterloo can issue people a ticket if they say anything to anyone that offends them or annoys them. And as we know, in 2023, almost everything can be found offensive by people. So this is a bylaw that will really stifle speech. It'll especially stifle anything approaching dissent from the approved narratives, because, again, I think it's very unrealistic that this law will be applied evenly. We've looked at a lot of examples over the last several weeks of political motivation to apply laws differently to different people depending on what their politics are. So if someone offends a Christian, I would be absolutely astounded if a Waterloo bylaw officer would actually issue a ticket. However, if you say something that concerns or offends an LGBT person, absolutely a ticket will be issued. So that's why I say this is really a law focused on stifling and stopping any dissent from the approved narratives. And it's all part of it. I mean, this is not a big surprise to me. In my view, capitalistic democracy, it does a really good marketing job of making people think that they have freedom, when in fact people have far less freedom than in a lot of previous so-called totalitarian societies. I think the fact that people are able to vote gives that false feel that you're free when we actually are not very free. So I think that's enough for today. This video, of course, is not legal advice. If you need legal advice, call another lawyer or myself. My contact information is below. Show description or show suggestions, always welcome. Send an email to the email address listed below, or leave a comment in the comment section. And if you found this video at all interesting, helpful, or informative, please consider liking, sharing, and subscribing. And remember, if we make it to 10,000 subscribers by the end of the year, I will regrow my handlebar mustache. So I think we're getting close to 8,000, but we've still got a ways to go if people want to see that happen.